The nannies kept quitting because of the millionaire's son. But this maid changed everything. Emily Vargas's old suitcase felt heavier than ever, not because of what was inside, but because of the fear weighing down her heart. She had just accepted a new job, a full-time maid position at the seaside mansion of Ethan Cole, one of the youngest and most successful tech entrepreneurs in California's Bay Area. That afternoon, when the taxi stopped before the tall iron gates, Emily felt as though she were stepping into another world, one where silence had its own beauty, yet an unsettling chill lurked beneath it. The house, all glass and white stone, stretched toward the ocean, surrounded by a garden so perfectly manicured that not a single leaf was out of place. The woman who opened the door was Mrs. Helen Brooks, a middle-aged housekeeper with a stern expression and a clipped voice. "Are you Vargas from Austin?" "Yes, ma'am." "Mr. Cole is very busy. I'll brief you on your duties. And remember, no questions, no curiosity, no crossing boundaries." Her tone was flat, like someone reading from a rule book. Emily nodded, clutching her bag tightly. She didn't dare ask anything else, just followed Helen through the marble-floored hallway, each footstep echoing coldly. Then, as they approached the grand staircase, a sudden sound shattered the silence. The cry of a child. Not the usual whimper of a restless baby, but a piercing, broken wail, as if he were trapped in fear. Helen froze. "Again," she muttered under her breath, weariness flickering in her eyes. Is that Mr. Cole's son?" Emily asked softly. "Lucas," Helen replied curtly. 18 months old, difficult child. Mr. Cole has hired several nannies, but for some reason, none of them stay." When Emily was shown to her small room on the lower floor, the staff quarters, Helen pointed toward the hall. "Dinner at 7, lights out at 10, and never enter the West Wing. That's Mr. Cole's and the boys' private area. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am, just Helen. You'll start work in the morning. Rest while you can." But that first night, Emily couldn't sleep. The distant crash of waves mingled with the wind against the glass. She was drifting off when the crying began again, louder this time, closer, echoing through the corridor. She sat up, heart racing. The sobs turned to trembling gasps, then sharp cries. Part of her wanted to ignore it, but her conscience wouldn't let her. Throwing on her sweater, she stepped into the hallway. Under the dim yellow light, it seemed endless. The sound guided her to a white door left slightly ajar. Emily stopped, her hand trembling on the knob. She took a deep breath and pushed it open. Inside, a small boy stood in his crib, crying so hard his voice cracked, tiny hands clutching the bars as if clinging to the world itself. The sight made Emily forget every rule she'd been told. She stepped closer and whispered gently, "Shh. It's okay, baby. You're not alone anymore." That was the moment of fate, the instant that would define everything that followed. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight spilled into the room, Emily thought she might have dreamed it all. But the white crib, the boy's swollen red eyes, and Helen's tired voice proved everything had been real. "You shouldn't have gone into the boys' room," Helen said while setting the breakfast table. "Mr. Cole doesn't like strangers near his son." Emily lowered her head. "I'm sorry, but I couldn't just leave him crying like that." Helen sighed softly. "I know. Everyone in this house hears him every night, but the master, he won't let anyone touch the child. Ever since Mrs. Anna passed, everything has changed." Emily froze. She didn't dare ask more, but the tone in Helen's voice told her that the pain still lingered, heavy and unspoken, in every corner of the house. All morning, Emily worked quietly, helping in the kitchen, cleaning, doing laundry. The mansion was frighteningly perfect, not a speck of dust, not a sound out of place. Even as sunlight streamed through the vast glass walls, the air remained cold, still, and lifeless. A photograph on the living room wall caught her attention. A young blonde woman with gentle eyes standing beside Ethan Cole, who was holding a newborn baby. Both were smiling, the kind of smile that belonged to people who once believed happiness would last forever. Emily reached out to touch the frame, but quickly withdrew her hand when she heard footsteps. "Miss Vargas," Helen said, her tone softer than usual. "Mr. Cole will be home late. Please set the dining room for dinner and, if Lucas cries again, leave him be. The master doesn't want anyone near his son." But that night, as if defying the rule itself, the crying returned. At first, it was just soft whimpers. Then came the desperate sobs, raw, pleading, unrelenting. Emily stood in her room, her hands trembling. She knew she wasn't allowed, but her heart couldn't ignore the sound of loneliness piercing the night. She walked toward the west wing door, hesitated for a moment, then opened it. Inside, Lucas was trembling in his crib, tears streaming down his face. When he saw Emily, his wet eyes paused, uncertain. Emily stepped closer and began to hum softly, her voice fragile but warm. "Sleep, my little one, for I am afraid of the sea." The boy went silent. The cries faded, replaced by the distant rhythm of waves crashing against the shore. Lucas looked up, reaching out his tiny hands to touch her hair, whispering a faint sound. "Ma." Emily gasped, eyes glistening. "It's all right, sweetheart. Everything will be okay." She didn't realize that, just beyond the doorway, Ethan Cole had returned, standing still, watching in silence. The man who lived by numbers, contracts, and absolute control suddenly felt something ache deep inside him. At the sight of a stranger gently cradling his son, singing a lullaby he couldn't understand, yet filled with pure love. That night, for the first time, warmth began to spread through the mansion that had long been frozen in silence. The next morning, Emily woke earlier than usual. She wasn't sure how long she had stayed in the boys' room the night before, only that Lucas had fallen asleep in her arms, his breathing soft and peaceful. When she left, fear whispered that she might be fired, but something deeper in her heart told her she wouldn't regret it. She brewed coffee in the kitchen, trying to start the day as if nothing had happened. But then Helen appeared, her expression strangely different. "You went into the boys' room, didn't you?" Emily froze, her hand halting midair over the cup. I'm sorry, I just—" Helen raised a hand to stop her. "The boy slept through the night. He didn't cry." "What?" Helen nodded, her tone softening. "That hasn't happened in nearly 2 years." The words made Emily's eyes sting. She hadn't imagined that a single lullaby, a single embrace, could give that lonely child a peaceful night's sleep after so many filled with tears. Near noon, while Emily was folding blankets, she heard the front door open. A man appeared in the hallway, tall, composed, but with an unmistakable weariness in his eyes. Ethan Cole. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice deep and cool. "I'm Emily Vargas, the new housemaid." Ethan was silent for a moment, glancing toward the room where Lucas slept. "Helen told me. You sang him to sleep last night." "I'm sorry," Emily said quickly. "I know I wasn't supposed to—" "No," Ethan interrupted. "I just want to know, how did you make him sleep?" Emily hesitated. "I didn't do anything special. I just sang to him." "Sang?" His brow lifted slightly. "In Spanish?" "Yes. It's a lullaby my mother used to sing when I was a child." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, his gaze searching for something even he couldn't define. Then he gave a small nod. "I owe you a thank you." From that day on, Emily was officially assigned to care for Lucas. At first, she only handled small tasks, changing diapers, feeding him, reading stories, taking him out to the garden each morning. But what truly astonished Helen and the rest of the staff was that Lucas began to smile. It was a hesitant, fragile smile, but real enough to warm anyone who saw it. One afternoon, while Emily was playing with Lucas on the porch, Ethan stepped outside, still holding his laptop. He stopped, watching them quietly. The little boy looked up, raised his teddy bear toward his father, and murmured, "Da!" Ethan froze. He couldn't believe his ears. Helen had told him that Lucas had never spoken that word, never once said, "Dad." Emily noticed the moment and smiled softly. "He just needed to feel safe," she said gently. "Then everything else comes naturally." Ethan replied in a low voice, "I'd forgotten what safety feels like." That night, light rain fell softly against the wide glass windows of the seaside mansion. Emily had just put Lucas to sleep. The small room was wrapped in the gentle glow of the night lamp and the faint scent of milk lingering in the air. She tidied up each toy, folded the little blanket, and just then a faint sound rose from downstairs. It was the piano, soft, melancholic, like raindrops falling straight into the heart. She descended the staircase quietly, step by step. In the dim golden light, the sight before her made her stop. Ethan Cole sat at a black mahogany piano, his hair slightly tousled, eyes half closed, fingers gliding across the keys as if touching memories. Each note felt like an old wound being reopened and retold through music. Emily stopped at the corner of the room, not daring to speak. When the final chord faded into silence, Ethan opened his eyes. He startled slightly when he saw her, then gave a faint, uneasy smile. "Sorry, I didn't think anyone else was awake." "There's no need to apologize, sir," Emily said softly, her voice trembling just a little. "Your music, it's beautiful, but also so sad, like someone saying goodbye without words." Ethan was silent for a moment. "This piece, it's called The Unsent Letter. Anna wrote it before she passed." She heard the heaviness in his tone, and her gaze followed his toward the framed photograph on the wall, a gentle, radiant woman's face, now only a memory. "She was a pianist," Ethan continued. "She played every night. I would just sit beside her, watching, feeling at peace. After she died, I swore I'd never touch this piano again. But tonight..." He hesitated, then gave a faint, wistful smile. "I heard Lucas laugh, and for a moment I wanted to play again, as if she were still listening somewhere." Emily said nothing. She simply stepped closer and sat beside him, her voice as soft as the sea breeze. "Maybe she really is still here, sir, in Lucas's smile and in every melody you've never dared to finish." Ethan looked down at his hands, exhaling slowly. His voice dropped low, almost like a confession. "I've never told anyone this. The night Anna died, I was in Australia. The meeting ran longer than expected. She called me several times, but I missed every one. By the time I got back, it was too late. I stood over Lucas's crib and couldn't breathe. Because every time I look at him, I see her eyes, and everything I lost." Emily stayed silent. She didn't offer empty comfort. She simply placed her hand gently over his. "You don't have to carry all that guilt alone. Lucas doesn't need a perfect father. He just needs a real one. A father who stays, even when his heart still hurts." Ethan looked at her for a long time. There was something in her eyes, something calm and kind, that made him feel lighter, as if, after years of suffocating inside his own guilt, someone had finally opened the door to let him breathe again. "Thank you, Emily," he said quietly, his deep voice warm now. "You have no idea how much you've helped me." She smiled faintly. "I just reminded you of something Lucas already knows, that love doesn't need to be perfect, it only needs to be real." That night, the music didn't echo in emptiness anymore. Inside that cold mansion, loneliness finally began to melt. One note, one heartbeat, one quiet act of love at a time. From that day on, the seaside mansion was no longer as cold as it once had been. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, and Lucas's laughter echoed down the halls, a sound the house had once thought it had lost forever. Emily established new routines: mealtimes, naps, play hours. She taught Lucas colors through wooden blocks and the names of objects with games like Where's the Sun and Touch the Sky. Every time he laughed, his dark eyes sparkled like tiny stars, softening Emily's heart. In the mornings, they went out to the garden. Emily spread a small blanket on the grass, letting Lucas crawl around, grab at flower petals, or cling to her leg. The breeze carried the faint scent of sea salt through the air. The little boy no longer trembled with fear. In its place was curiosity, bright, eager eyes discovering the world for the very first time. One afternoon, as Emily was feeding him porridge, Helen stepped in, smiling. "Look at you," she said. "You're like the boy's mother." Emily let out a quiet laugh. "I'm just doing my job." "No, Vargas," Helen shook her head gently. "You've brought something none of us could." "Warmth?" Ethan was rarely home, but each time he returned, he noticed something different. The living room was no longer silent. The nursery no longer smelled of sleeping medicine or echoed with sobs. And his little boy, the child he had once been afraid to touch, now ran straight into Emily's arms, clinging to her as if she were the only safe place in the world. One evening, Ethan came home earlier than usual. He found them in the living room, Lucas sitting on the rug, listening intently as Emily read a fairy tale. The boy tilted his head, giggling every time Emily changed her voice. Ethan stood still, unwilling to interrupt. "She makes my son laugh," he thought, "something I never could." Then Lucas spotted his father. He stood, wobbling on his tiny feet, and held out the book. "Dada." Ethan knelt down, taking the book, unsure of what to say. Emily spoke softly. "You should read with him, even just for a few minutes." He hesitated. "I'm not very good at this." "You don't have to be," she smiled. "You just have to be there." "Xiaodu." Ethan sat beside his son and began to read, haltingly, clumsily, one word at a time. Lucas tilted his head, then leaned against his father's shoulder, his small fingers brushing Ethan's chin. Ethan stopped, not because he forgot the words, but because his heart was trembling. Emily watched them, a quiet smile curving her lips. Later that night, as Ethan stepped out onto the balcony, she was still tidying up the toys. He paused, his voice gentle as the breeze. "Thank you." "For what?" "For teaching me how to be with my son." Emily looked up, her clear eyes reflecting the soft light. "You didn't need anyone to teach you. You'd just forgotten." In the fading glow of sunset, Ethan looked at her for a long time. Something unfamiliar had begun to take root, not loud or sudden, but deep and true, like the steady breath of the sea itself. Since that night, something quiet had begun to change between them. Ethan was no longer the withdrawn man hiding behind the silent walls of his seaside mansion. He was learning, step by step, to be a father again, awkwardly, slowly, but sincerely. The first morning, when Emily opened the kitchen door, she found him struggling with a baby bottle. Milk had spilled across the counter, and the kettle was hissing. The sight made her laugh softly. "My boss, the man who once convinced entire investors' boards with a few numbers, is now losing to a baby bottle." Ethan looked up, embarrassed but smiling. "Don't tell anyone. I'm still trying to learn how not to be defeated by Lucas every morning." "No one's losing," Emily replied gently. "There are only people learning how to love." From that day on, mornings in the house were no longer wrapped in silence. Ethan and Emily fed Lucas together, changed his diapers, wiped milk from his chin. Each time he dropped the spoon or fastened the wrong button, Emily only smiled softly and reached over to help him fix it. One morning, Lucas threw a piece of bread from his high chair, and it landed right on his father's crisp white shirt. Ethan looked down, then burst out laughing, a sound Emily had never heard from him before. "I suppose this is the most important meeting of my life," he said, dabbing at the stain while looking at his son. Emily chuckled. "And the only meeting where the boss isn't allowed to get angry." Lucas giggled, reaching out with his tiny hands to touch both of theirs. It was such a simple moment, yet something melted in the air, an invisible thread quietly weaving the three hearts together. From that day forward, the seaside mansion was no longer a place of painful memories. Each sunrise brought the scent of coffee mingling with a child's laughter. Emily brewed the coffee, Ethan read the newspaper, and Lucas crawled across the wooden floor, dragging his little teddy bear behind him. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting over them the kind of peace the house had been missing for far too long. A family, not perfect, but being reborn. The next evening, the California sky tore open with the first summer storm. Thunder rolled across the ocean, lightning flashed against the glass walls of the mansion, and the power flickered a few times before dying completely, leaving the house swallowed in darkness and the howl of wind from the sea. Emily clutched Lucas tightly in her arms as she hurried downstairs to the living room, where Helen was rushing to light candles everywhere. The golden glow flickered across the walls, dancing with every gust that slipped through the cracks. From the hallway, Ethan appeared, his shirt damp, hair tousled, droplets of rain still clinging to his skin. The faint scent of soap mingled with the rain in the air. "Are you afraid of thunder?" he asked, his voice low and warm in the dark. Emily shook her head, holding the trembling child closer. "No, sir, but Lucas is." The little boy burrowed into her shoulder, his wide, wet eyes following the candlelight. Each rumble of thunder made his small hands clutch her blouse even tighter. Ethan knelt beside them, resting a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "It's all right, son. Daddy's here." Lucas lifted his head slightly, his lips quivering before he pressed himself even deeper into Emily's chest. She held him close, and without realizing it, her hand brushed against Ethan's, a small, instinctive gesture that made both of them freeze. In the flickering candlelight, his face was so near she could see each drop of water glistening on his temple. Their eyes met, no words, only breath mingling between them in the rhythm of the storm. After a while, the thunder faded. The wind softened, leaving only the distant sound of waves. Lucas had fallen asleep, his face peaceful as an angel's, against Emily's heart. She gently started to lay him down on the sofa, but Ethan stepped forward, his voice low, almost like a request. "Let me. You're tired." He leaned in, lifting his son into his arms. His movements were slow, careful, full of tenderness. His silhouette in the candlelight looked warm, almost fragile. When he turned back, he saw Emily still standing there, her brown eyes glimmering softly as she watched father and son with an emotion too deep to name. "You've brought this house, and me, back to life," Ethan said softly, his voice trembling under the candlelight. "I don't know what I did to deserve that." Emily lowered her gaze, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I just followed what my heart whispered. Maybe that's what brought me to this house." Ethan stepped closer, stopping just a heartbeat away. His eyes no longer carried the distance of a man in control, but the warmth of someone finding himself again. "Your heart," he murmured, "is what reminded me that I can still love." In that moment, the room grew so still they could hear the soft dripping of rain from the eaves outside. The candlelight shimmered over their faces, fragile, luminous, like a dream too delicate to touch. Neither of them spoke again, but both knew, in the quiet rhythm of the night rain, that something had begun between them, silent, tender, and beyond turning back. For several days the rain didn't stop. The air inside the seaside mansion was damp and cold, and the ocean wind carried a heavy mist through the halls. Emily still woke up early, still cared for Lucas, still smiled whenever he called out, "Mama!" But her body had begun to weaken. Helen noticed first. "Miss Vargas, you look pale. Maybe you should take a day off." "I'm fine, really? Just a little tired," Emily replied with a faint smile, hiding a small cough. But by afternoon, she could barely stand. When Ethan came home, he found her sitting on the floor, trying to hold Lucas while her hands trembled uncontrollably. "Emily!" he shouted, rushing to her side. He caught her just as she swayed. Her cheeks were burning hot, her breathing shallow. "I'm fine. No more talking. You're going to bed. Now." He lifted her easily, gently but firmly, as if she were something too fragile to let fall. Helen hurried to prepare the bed, bringing warm towels and medicine. Ethan sat by her side, changing the compress on her forehead, wiping away the sweat. "You've been taking care of everyone," he murmured softly. "Now it's your turn to be cared for." Lucas crawled to the bedside, clutching Emily's finger. "Ma." She forced a tired smile, stroking his hair. "Mommy's okay, sweetheart." Ethan watched them, a strange ache tightening in his chest, a mix of worry and something deeper. Fear of losing her. He had never imagined that a stranger could become so essential to his life. All night, he stayed in her room. When Emily finally drifted into sleep, Ethan turned to Lucas, gently rocking him in his arms and whispering, "Go to sleep, buddy. Emily will be better soon." The next morning, when Emily opened her eyes, soft daylight was filtering through the curtains. On the nearby sofa, Ethan and Lucas were both asleep, Lucas curled up against his father's chest, his tiny hands clutching the fabric of Ethan's shirt. Emily lay still, watching them, a quiet smile curving her lips. For the first time in her life, she saw the image of a family, peaceful, simple, and utterly beautiful. The sun finally broke through after days of rain. The ocean shimmered, and the air in the mansion felt lighter, fresher. Emily was folding laundry when Helen walked in, lowering her voice. "Mr. Cole has a visitor, a woman. She arrived in a luxury car. Looks like she stepped out of a magazine." Emily looked up. "What's her name?" "Isabella Moore," Helen replied. "I heard she's an old friend of Mr. Cole's. From college." The name made Emily's heart skip. She didn't know why, but something inside her stirred. A quiet unease she couldn't explain. From the window, she saw them walking through the garden, a beautiful blonde woman in an elegant white dress beside Ethan. They laughed easily, comfortable in a way that spoke of a shared past. For a moment, Emily stood frozen. She suddenly saw it so clearly, the distance between their worlds, his filled with wealth and grace, hers with modest clothes and calloused hands. That evening, Ethan dressed sharply. "I'm attending a gala tonight," he said, avoiding her gaze. "Isabella invited me. She's running the charity foundation Anna started." Emily smiled faintly. "That's wonderful. You should go." But when the door closed, her heart sank like a stone. She spent the evening reading to Lucas, though her voice faltered every few pages. Each time she pictured Ethan beside Isabella, her flawless smile, her polished poise, a dull ache grew inside her. It was something new, unfamiliar, and painful. Jealousy. Around midnight, she heard the car pull up. Ethan stepped inside, loosening his tie, looking weary. "How was the gala?" she asked softly. "Fine," he said, "but I realized I don't belong there anymore." "Why not?" because all I could think about was Lucas and this house. He paused, eyes soft but steady. Isabella is the past. I knew that the moment she reminded me of the man I used to be, not the one I'm trying to become. Emily looked down, her voice trembling. I just worry. We're too different. Different? He stepped closer. You bring something no one in my world ever could. Peace. The space between them shrank to nothing. Then, from the next room, Lucas's cry pierced the silence. Emily turned quickly, scooping the child into her arms. Ethan stood still, watching, realizing, perhaps for the first time, that this woman had become the center of his world. Later that night, as Emily rocked Lucas to sleep, she whispered to herself, "Never let your heart believe in the impossible." But deep down, she already knew. The impossible had begun to feel real. Since that day, Emily had grown quiet. She avoided Ethan, keeping her focus entirely on caring for Lucas. But Ethan noticed. One night after the boy had fallen asleep, he knocked on her door. "Why are you avoiding me?" "I'm not," she replied softly. "I just don't want to cause you any more trouble." "What trouble?" Emily stayed silent for a long moment. Ethan's gaze was steady, unyielding. "Answer me, Emily." "There's nothing to say, sir." She turned, intending to leave, but Ethan caught her hand. "Emily, I've tried not to think about you, but the harder I try, the more I fail." She froze, her heart racing, fingers tightening on the hem of her blouse. "Please, don't say that," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm just someone you hired to take care of your son." Ethan shook his head slowly, stepping closer. His eyes softened, filled with something between gratitude and longing. "No, Emily, you're not just someone I hired. You're the reason this house breathes again. You made Lucas laugh. You reminded me that I still have a heart." She took a hesitant step back, but his voice stopped her, low, certain, cutting through the fragile space between them. "I don't know when it started. Maybe that night you sang my son to sleep, or the morning you smiled, milk on your hands, and said, 'We did it, Mr. Cole.' But I know one thing for certain." He paused, his eyes trembling. "I don't want to lose you." Emily's throat tightened, her voice barely escaped. "Ethan, this isn't right. Between us—" He interrupted gently, not with force but with a quiet strength that made her heart quake. "Maybe right or wrong never mattered at all. What matters is what's true. And the truth is, I love you." She trembled, her voice barely a whisper. "Ethan." He took her hand, his gaze deep as the sea. "I love you, Emily, not because you care for my son, but because you saved me. From myself." Silence enveloped them. Only the sound of waves, the wind, and the pounding rhythm of two hearts facing each other. Emily pulled her hand back, tears falling down her cheeks. "I love you too, but this love, it might hurt us both." "And if that's the price of loving honestly," Ethan said softly, "then I'll pay it." He leaned in and kissed her. Their first kiss, gentle, trembling, yet so real that the whole world seemed to stop. 5 years passed. The ocean was still the same shade of blue, but the mansion by the shore had changed, no longer the cold, silent place it once was, but a home filled with laughter and sunlight. Emily opened the window. The sea breeze carried in the scent of salt and life. In the garden, Lucas, now 7, chased his little sister, Elena, their laughter echoing across the yard. "Careful," she called. "Yes, Mom," Lucas answered, his voice stronger now, his eyes still bright with wonder. Ethan walked into the kitchen, kissed her on the cheek. "Up early again?" "Just habit," she smiled. "I've got a meeting at the Children's Center today." He nodded, pouring her coffee. "You never stop helping people, do you?" Emily met his gaze, her eyes warm. "You once told me, when we're loved, We should pass that love on. I'm just doing what you taught me." On the living room wall hung a sign that read, "Sophia Foundation, a home for every child." Adieu. It was the charity Emily founded 3 years ago, giving women job training and providing homes for orphans. Ethan supported her completely, turning her dream into something real. That afternoon, the family attended Lucas's piano recital. He sat before the grand piano, light spilling softly across his face. When the music began, the room fell silent. The piece was called "For My Mom." Each note carried tenderness and truth, a melody woven from gratitude. When it ended, Lucas bowed and spoke clearly. "This song is for my mom, because she taught me that love doesn't erase loss, it transforms it into something beautiful." Applause erupted. Emily's tears slipped quietly down her cheeks. Ethan squeezed her hand and whispered, "You see, you didn't just save me and Lucas, you made the world better." That night, the family sat on the porch. Lucas hummed softly, singing the same lullaby Emily once sang to him. "Duérmete, mi niño." Emily rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. "I still remember the first time I heard him cry in this house." Ethan smiled, eyes distant. "And I remember the moment you walked through that door and brought the light with you." The ocean wind moved gently, waves whispering like time itself. In that house, love was no longer a fragile hope. It had become a legacy, passed from one heart to another, from Emily to Ethan, from them to their children, and to the lives they touched. And there, beneath the calm sunset sky, the woman who had once been just a housekeeper had become the heart of a family, and the living proof that love can heal.